to me always has stuck in my mind as a magic box, right? And to this day it's a magic box even still. Well, I always had intended to have a museum, right? But I suppose my wife wasn't well, and in 2002, after I retired, my wife died. So that was a big hole in my life, you know. And getting something to fill in to whatever. I went on my rounds anyway, searching here and there. Well, I always blamed her for starting the collection. She blamed me for collecting radios. And I used to say, you bought the first one, because she lived with her sister before we were married in Brook Green in London. And she got a tax rebate or something from work. And so she bought a little Bush radio. So that was actually the first one in the collection. And that was about 59, I'd say. It all began in 1947 in a little village in the west of Ireland. A little village called Ranamach, and in Irish has been known as the Fort of the Bees. And it's just outside, 3 miles outside of Crossmolina, so we lived right out in the heart of the countryside. Of course, that particular year, the first All-Ireland had been played outside of Ireland for the first and only time, and it was played in the Polo Grounds in New York between Cavan and Kerry. And news spread like wildfire around the neighbouring villages that this magic box was going to appear in this particular house. To see the place all lit up with the bulbs and valves of the radio, and an aerial up a tree, and this voice coming from 3,000 miles away into a cottage, as I say, in semi-darkness in the west of Ireland. It was sheer magic.
Ty collects the ball, sends it into Higgins. Higgins dodges past one man, sends to McDyer. McDyer gets ready to shoot, but he's foiled. He gets the ball again, and back it goes to Donoghue, but Dan O'Keefe is not easily beaten in the Kerry goal. And so, a few moments later...
Shortly, a few years after that, in 1953, 6 years later, I immigrated to London as a young fella, 16 years of age or whatever. And I had applied for a job in a hotel before I went over. And when I got to the hotel, I had my own room there, and installed before my very eyes was a radio, or wireless, or magic box. Radio is a theatre of the mind, because what you did, in your imagination, you formed the pictures in your imagination. Like me listening to the match in America, I would be able to see every kick of the ball or whatever in my imagination. I lived in West Kensington, and as I went to work in the morning, unknown to me, vinyl records had just come in, right? So people were disposing of their old 78 records. So there would be hundreds of them thrown out for the bin man in the morning. And I used to look at the records and realise they were in mint condition, or in pristine condition, whereas the ones we had in the west of Ireland were all worn and torn because you couldn't get needles during the war. And I started to pick up some of those records that were thrown out for the bin man in the morning. And that, I suppose, started my collecting in a sense. I have various pieces, I suppose, that are extra special to me. And one of them is an American Pilot, which is over there on the shelf. And it's up on top there. And particularly so because I had it by my bedside, I suppose, for the biggest part of 40 years. And I could tune in any time of night around the world, and with no outdoor aerial or whatever. So I always regarded it as my prime radio. The radio is part of you, you know. It is part of you. It is, and still part of me, because I rarely watch television. It's about listening. In 1898, long before wireless was intended or whatever, or nobody knew how it was going to happen, the paper decided to invite Marconi down here to do a transmission on one of the big sporting events in the British Empire at the time, which was the Kingstown Regatta, now known locally as Dunleary. They went into a boat out on the bay here, and opposite the tower here was the finishing line for the longer races from Kingstown. As the boats finished at the finishing line out here, Marconi wrote down the results and he transmitted them without wires into the harbour master's office in Kingstown. The results of the races were on the evening paper. This was the first sporting event in the world transmitted by wireless, and it was all the first journalistic use of wireless in the world, and it happened just opposite the tower here. Scientists at the time thought it wasn't possible to get it around the curvature of the earth, but Marconi disproved all this, and this actually sent him on his way to Newfoundland, where, if you listen to the record, is regarded as the birth of radio, where everything started. But in actual fact, what happened here was 3 years earlier, so you can figure how advanced we are here in Holt. I suppose for a start, collecting is a sort of a madness that we cannot control. I suppose I'm lucky enough because I mostly collect just radios and gramophones. Some people collect everything, you know. But I kind of limited myself to radios and gramophones. But even with radios and gramophones, there's a lot of accessories as well. So if you play a gramophone, you need a needle, and the needle to work, you need a record. So not alone have you the gramophone or the radio, but you have the bits and pieces, advertisings that go with them as well. And as you'll see here in the museum, to make up it all, you have to have the full package, and you kind of never have the full package. So if you can afford it, you're tempted to buy it. So that's why collectors are always broke. Yes, something in the blood. I can't get to what it is really, but it's in the system, you know. And I suppose where at one time, maybe 20, 30 or 40 years ago, I would pick up any old wireless or radio, and now it has to be, I'd be more choosy in my collecting or whatever. Because as you see here, I have a lot of models from the early ones, from the crystal sets up, right up into the transistors and whatever. And I could go out tomorrow and something might have been produced in China or India or somewhere around the world, maybe a new one. But yet it would be the design of it, or the colour of it, or the shape of it, or whatever, that would attract my eye. One cannot tell the future, you know. One could be taken from this at any time. One would not leave it voluntarily, but one could be taken and have no say over it. You don't know. But I suppose collecting is in the blood, and while I'm able to collect, I probably will, you know. Who knows?